County Advisory Board, could you please stand and state your name and county?
Paul Dixon, Clark.
Brad Johnston, Lyon.
John Reed, Washoe.
Rex Flowers, Washoe.
Ben French, Elko.
Tom Barnes, Elko.
All right, thank you for all coming. We'll move on to agenda item 17, approval of agenda. Commissioner Drew, you had a comment yesterday.
It's actually in the proper order, so I can go ahead.
Okay. Any other agenda items we need to address? Anybody in the public have any comments on the agenda? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the commission for a vote. All those
Move to approve.
have a motion second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, motion passed unanimous. Member announcements. Any members have any items they need to bring up today? Seeing none, we'll move on to agenda item number 19, County Advisory Boards. Do the counties have anything they'd like to bring to our attention today? Okay, we'll move on to item 20, second reading of Commission Policy 23, Pedestrian Management. Commissioner McDuff and Staff Specialist Keith Bradley for possible action.
Okay, I'll go ahead and just take a peek. If we need you to come up, I'll call you up. But last meeting, we agreed to do the final reading of the Policy 23, today's commission meeting. That gave us an opportunity to also go through the policy one more time and clean it up. And what I did is I went through the policy, and the vast majority of the differences that you see between the policy which is in front of you today and from the last meeting are wherever we use and I'm just going to do this by example, wherever we define something like the very first part of the purpose, it says Department of Wildlife, and then in parentheses we put department. From then on, I did a word search and made sure that we had used the word department and not the word Department of Wildlife each place it was subsequently in the document. And so, for instance, Board of Wildlife Commissioners down in the Authority for Predation Management, Board of Wildlife Commissioners, Commission in parentheses, we use the word commission after that. We don't write out the word Board of Wildlife Commission. And so, same thing, U.S. Department of Agriculture, Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service, Wildlife Services, we define that as Wildlife Services. We use Wildlife Services after that. And finally, as an example, the name of the committee we changed, because we had not voted to change the name of our committee. We went back to what it was, Wildlife Damage Management Committee of the Commission, and so we, in parentheses, that's defined as a committee. And so throughout the entire document, I did word search and cleaned all that up. There are other definitions like that throughout the document. I'm not going to address any others. These are not substantive changes of any type. It's words different, basically get the document cleaned up. We did do one additional, we added one sentence, one substantive sentence to the policy, and I made comments that the way the Predation Management Plan section of the policy is written, it's really circular. And since a lot of times these projects are continuing, we evaluate the projects from the prior year, and if you look at item 10 of the Predation Management Plan portion of the policy, it indicates that the department should prepare an annual predation management status report detailing the results of the previous fiscal year's projects. And then this status report shall be presented to the last commission meeting of the calendar year, which would be this meeting here. And you will see on our agenda that we do have the status report completed for the fiscal year ending June 30th of 2013. But what I realized is that that we haven't gone back and tied the status report into number one, which is the department putting together the next year's fiscal plan. And so what you'll see is the last sentence of the predation management plan, item 1. We added the following sentence: regarding all projects proposed to be continued from the prior fiscal year, the draft plan shall address the department's comments from the prior fiscal year's status report. So that now ties it together. When the department does the current year, the next fiscal year's plan, they have to take into account the status report, the comments of the status report from the prior fiscal year, and address them, and how the new plan is going to address those comments. And so that is the only substantive change to the policy. And so with that, I guess I'll ask the commission, the rest of the commissioners, if they have any comments. If they have seen any other issues with the policy. We also have some members of the committee on the commission as well. So if there's any other comments, why don't you go ahead and bring those up at this time.
Any commissioners have any comments? Commissioner Moore?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If you go to page 7, on number 9, I think it would be important to add in language that the department shall review reports submitted by, and change that to in coordination with all contractors and cooperators. My thoughts are on that is it could maybe clear up any inaccuracies that could be found in the status report.
Commissioner Lewis?
I'd have to agree with that. I think it'd be a good idea that before a status report is put out, that the contractors that were providing the service and the department staff can get together and discuss the projects, their findings, and before that report is turned out. So I think it's a good addition.
Any other comment? Commissioner Lane?
Mr. Chairman, could we hear that one more time?
The way I see it, the department shall review reports in coordination with all contractors and cooperators for projects, and shall submit copies of the reports and comments of the department to the committee and stakeholders before September 1. And strike the word submitted by.
Any other commission comments or questions? All right, seeing none, it is an action item, so we will start with public comment. Mr. Reed?
John Reed, Washoe Cab. It was pointed out to me prior to our meeting that if you looked at paragraphs 4 and 5 on page 5, dealing with the draft predation management plans, it kind of leaves hanging who is actually going to be the deciding authority on this thing. And it seemed to us that if you're not careful, you can end up being an advisory board rather than the ones that are directing the management plan itself. So we added a little bit of language. First of all, the entire policy 23 passed unanimously with this caveat, that on page 5, paragraph 5, the first sentence had the following: the department shall finalize the predation management plan for the next fiscal year subject to the Nevada Board of Wildlife Commissioners approval. And we think that takes out any muddy waters, makes sure that it leaves the Wildlife Commission in charge of this, and not in an advisory capacity. I don't know where your authority lies currently, but I would certainly want to keep that authority if I could.
I believe Commissioner Macbeth has a reply to that, and there's a reason why we're at where we're at.
This issue has come up on numerous occasions. I believe the last time was Commissioner Bliss, Commissioner Blue actually raised the issue. And the statute as written basically states that the commission shall provide guidance to the department. And I went back to our DAG, and at this, on this particular issue, DAG Newton, and asked specifically what that meant. And what that meant is that the commission works in cooperation with the department, but does not have approval authority. Okay, so there, this is a situation where we're, and this entire policy is written to, in my opinion, push the envelope on the amount of guidance that the commission can give the department without going to the full extent of approving the plan. So we are interjecting the commission through this, the commission and the committee through this process are interjecting in what I feel is the maximum amount of guidance to the commission, to the department, but going short of approving the plan. The plan is the department's plan. And that's what the statute says, and so we have respected that. If we went any further, I believe that we would be exceeding our authority under the statute. And so when you look at that, NRS 502253, it specifically says, guidance. And so we have gone that far that we've stopped short of approval.
Well, that's good. And in that event, the Washoe CAB would like to see you maintain the greatest possible input and authority where it's available.
Okay, thank you.
We've had about an 18-month discussion on what the word guidance means, and if you can come up with a definition better than we've heard, I'd like to hear it, but. All right, Mr. Dixon.
Paul Dixon, Clark County. We had, all you received our action report. We had some recommendations, and I'll read through those. And I had one other one that was brought up but didn't make our action report because it wasn't part of the motion, but I'll bring it up as a personal issue in the end because one of the board members asked me to. There was a lot of concern that people hear the word predation management plan, and they assume that what we're doing with that is predation removal, lethal predation removal. And that seems to be the overwhelming sportsman response for everybody that I've talked to in Southern Nevada. They don't really understand that there's a study, an education, and a habitat part to this that are all part of the policy, that are all part of the NRS. We had a long discussion on this. And there was a suggestion that maybe if we change the name away from just a predation management plan, but a predation management and study plan, people would start to understand that it has a greater usage. And I don't know if that makes anything, but it was a recommendation that we gave as a board. The other thing is that when you read through this, there's a lot of policy dates that you have to meet for various things to happen with the plan along the way as you're developing the plan from the policy. And we felt it would be nice if you had a little Excel table or something in the back with the dates and what the things are, just in one table form in one place, because you have to really read the policy carefully to understand when you have the various due dates. And we just thought it would be helpful to have something in there that was very clear to when things are happening, so that people who saw the policy would know which commission meetings or the things were going to be discussed well in advance, so they could come prepared to have discussions. And as I started out with, because of the misunderstanding of people of what our predation management policy and plans actually do, there were several suggestions, and one of them would be, is that on the end out page we have a link somewhere that describes in greater detail what this policy is. And then ultimately, as people apply for tags, every time they apply, they check the box that there's a $3 predation fee. they get a little pop-up box that reminds them of what that money is going to be spent for. It just reminds them of what are the statute, the 4 items in the statute that people see, so that we start to educate the public to what predation management is per the NRS statute. And from there, I think we'll slowly get around the thing. But right now, I do believe that everybody I talk to thinks that when you say predation management, it's 90x% of people think it's lethal, lethal carnivore removal. And finally, on number 1 of the policy, under section C, I guess it's section C, number 2. The second sentence starts out, descriptions of the control programs, management activities, research programs, and education programs collectively referred to as projects shall include specific project goals, detailed descriptions, and anticipated results, predator, prey, species that may be impacted, whether or not the project will span more, and shall include, and whether or not the project shall include more than 1 fiscal year. If the project is for control program, a statement of why the department believes predator wildlife is a limiting factor in growth and maintenance of the target predation prey. There was a concern raised by one of the board members, and I'm bringing this up personally for him, is that we appear to be, if we're going to do lethal predator control, that we have additional requirements that are being put upon us that are not being put upon the rest of the policy attributes here. And so he had a concern that we were putting forward more restrictions if you're going to do lethal predator reuse, because you have to do more documentation if you're going to go there. And he wanted to know what the drive was for that and had it documented on the record. Thank you.
Thank you.
For the record, Mike Laughlin, I'm representing myself. On the second page of this commission policy number 23, third paragraph, pursuant to NRS, whatever, the department is hereby authorized to expend a portion of the money collected pursuant to subsection 1 of NRS 502253 to enable the State Department of Agriculture to develop and carry out programs described in subsection 1. My question would be this: in developing these plans and all the things that have gone on, has Wildlife Services been involved in the development of these programs? And I would direct that to Director Wosley, please. He's busy.
We're in public comment, and I don't know how much interaction we're going to get into at this point.
Well, this is public comment. I'm asking, was Wildlife Services involved in formulating the plans, the program? They're the people that carry out the work. Were they involved in this, putting this all together? That's my question.
Everybody in the public has been involved. This has been a long, I don't know of any other committee that has met as long as this committee and has had as many changes. So I would have to say yes, because there's been a ton of public involvement, and Wildlife Services is part of that public and has been present at every meeting. So your answer is yes.
Thank you.
Corey?
For the record, Corey Lytle, Lincoln Cap. Hey, this is kind of a side question. With the informational item later, status report, is there going to be any comment allowed on that, public comment allowed on the status report?
Yes, I will comment on that. It's a big enough item, we will have public comment. Come on up, Mr. Barnes.
Tom Barnes, Chairman of Elko County CAB. As you guys probably saw from what we submitted, you guys, we opposed policy 23 as it was written. We did realize that we like the way it's been cleaned up. Some is looking better to us, but there are some issues that still concern us. One being that this $3 fee is supposed to be spent on predator control. And we understand that habitat and studies, everything has to be in there because that was in the statute, and so we accept that. So what we, one of our recommendations that we'd like to see to ensure that this money is being spent on predators is that somewhere in this report there be a specified amount of money to be spent on actual predator control. And in the motion that was made, we came up with 70%. We'd like to see 70% of the money spent on the actual predator control. And then the rest could go to the necessary studies and whatnot that needs to be completed. And then also another comment was made, and it was the same as Washoe County. And here in the comments, I kind of understand where you're coming from. But we'd like to see the commission be able to have more input in this, and if at some point it could ever be brought up as a action item instead of just an informational item, we'd like to see that also.
Thank you. Anybody else? Mr. Carpenter?
For the record, John Carpenter from Elko. And Gary Claymore and I were really the reason that is you have this $3 fee. And because Jerry represented the sportsman, represented Clark County, and I'm very familiar with predator control, we were able to get this through. With policy 23, you're attempting to change and bypass NRS 502.253, the so-called $3 fee legislation. The purpose of the $3 fee was to implement and continue on-the-ground predator control. The $3 fee was not to be used for unneeded research in habitat programs. Testimony on the bill was strongly in favor of on-the-ground predator control. In fact, Senator Dean Rose asked the committee staff for their understanding of the legislation. Their response was, it is for on-the-ground predator control. The passage of this bill was unanimous in both the Senate and the Assembly. Policy 23 is not needed. Policy 25 has served the wildlife of the state very well for many years. The proposed policy 23 is so full of ambiguous and false premise that in the end it will stifle and eliminate on-the-ground predator control. It is written to protect and increase predators, not to protect and enhance our wildlife. Take a look back at history when we had thousands of livestock, especially sheep, and an adequate predator control program. The deer and sage-grouse populations were at record high numbers. We have very few sheep left, and predator control is minuscule compared to what it used to be. With the passage of Policy 23, you are driving the nail in the coffin that will eventually be the demise of our deer and sage-grouse population. I don't think there's any question that this is anti-predator control, and I'm sure that within a few years, there is not going to be any. If somebody's going to read this thing and take it to a nth degree, and put all the money into studies, like you have that one over there in the center of the state, put $100,000 into it last year. And that study is not needed. But I think that you guys are on the wrong track, and hopefully you won't pass this, but I know you're going to. You know, I worked for all my life to try to help the wildlife. You wouldn't have the elk in Elko County that you have now if it wasn't for me. You get the ranchers to come along with the management programs. And now what have we got? The department hasn't lived up to their word. We've got all kinds of problems with elk.
Okay, we're
We
getting off,
don't have that problems
we're getting
with
off
the deer.
topic. We're getting off topic, and you've exceeded your 3
I know you
minutes.
don't want to hear it, but I'm just telling you.
Okay,
I've been out there longer than any of you guys.
I'm
I've done
concerned.
more work for wildlife than anybody in this state.
Okay.
And so I hope you will not pass this, at least change it, like the Elko Cab recommended. At least they have to spend a percentage on it. I think in the bill that the governor vetoed was at 75% or something. At least do something to keep the $3 fee is what it's supposed to be.
Okay, thank you, sir. Who else we have? Come on up. And Dr. Lane.
Walt Gardner for the record. The heartburn I have with this is people haven't just been putting their $3 in. I've been checking the box below and making a donation for predator control. It says predator fee. And I was under the assumption that that money would be used for predator. And now it's coming out that it's going to be used for studies. And that was not my assumption when I made those donations. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Lane.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, my name is Gerald Lynn. I represent the Nevada Hunter Association. And as I testified before, this policy 23 is written and it keeps changing every time I see it because it does not follow the law. NRS 502-253 Section 2 says to enable the State Department of Agriculture to develop and carry out the programs described in subsection 1. And I was one of the original supporters of this bill long before you guys were even on the commission. And I think the true intent of the bill was to control predators on the ground. And I gave you last time a letter, the governor signed it, and based on the comments he made in a letter that says, it's been very clear to me about your desire, and it was directed to the director to bring back the deer. And that was the intent of the bill, and it was signed by that. And even the director at the time stated in a 3-page letter, which I gave you, that to ensure that the Predator Committee acknowledges the desire of the legislature to see the recovery of Nevada's mule deer as the principal focus of the predator management projects. This totally isn't what it's doing right now. And I wanted to bring that back to your attention. And also, the true intent of this bill was to put projects on the ground, not to study them. And the commission and the chairman and the director, I counted 5 meetings, 5 times. You said you'll get Wildlife Service involved in this plan. 5 times, it's on record, publicly, you guys stated that. And I take, the chairman just testified, the public did put input in this. Well, I take exception to the comments that he just made. They have not been involved. They are not the public. Wildlife Service is not the public. And you said everyone been involved in it. Wildlife Service is not the public. They're a government agency. And I do not think they've been involved. And this commission has said 5 times on the record they're going to get Wildlife Services involved. They have not done that. You went back on your word. And if you don't believe me, go back and look at the minutes. I'll give you every commission meeting where you stated that. And they're not the public. And addressing the chairman of the committee, where he said that Dag Newton said that guidance. That's not true. He told me the legislature of the bill didn't define guidance. And the law doesn't have to define guidance. There's Supreme Court decisions on words. And the Supreme Court has made a ruling, and they've defined what guidance is. Every bill that comes out of the legislature doesn't have to have a definition of guidance, because the Supreme Court has done that already. So if you go back and look at some of those things, what the Supreme Court says guidance is, this bill, guidance means it has to be approved by the commission. That's exactly. So contrary to what your DAG said, the definition is a Supreme Court decision. It doesn't have to be written. The legislators don't have to define every little word they put in the bill. They've already been defined by the law. And I find it very perplexing that we have 5, and I was part of the sponsored bill that put 2 more sportsmen on this commission. And we did it for a reason, because we thought sportsmen would protect our wildlife. We got 5 sportsmen majority, and I find it very perplexing that those 5 sportsmen here, and you know who we are, we let an anti-hunter make the motion to pass this. And I really think it's really perplexing what the hunters represent here. A sportsman, I also find a sportsman representative voted 100% of the time on the committee with the anti-hunting rep on the commission. That's according to the minutes of the meeting. 100% of the time we have a sportsman rep vote with the anti-hunting person.
I'm sorry, but...
No, I'd like to finish.
I'm not going to allow that to go on. We do not have an anti-hunting rep. We have different reps, they're spelled out in statute, and I'm not going to let that
Okay, there is one on there. But anyway, if you look at section 4 and 5 on the plan, it says that the commission has given up their rights, basically, to do this. And I think that silence with the sportsman's rep, silence makes cowards out of the best of men when our sportsman's rep don't speak up and support the sportsman on this. And I think it's very, very perplexing and distressing that this commission, especially the sportsman's rep, they want to abrogate their powers here. And I'm going to define that, abrogate for you. That means formally or publicly giving up a position of power or responsibility, usually by choice. The law said that you make the final decision on the predator plan, and this policy goes against it. And you guys, Washoe County had the right idea when they said subject to the commission approval. And I don't think you can tell me that you don't have the authority to do that. I think you better go back and look at it, because I think this commission has the power to do that. That was the intent of the bill, and the intent of the governor when he signed it, and the intent of the legislature, because they wanted to put it in the hands of some sportsmen and the commission here to do it, not the department. And that's the intent of it. And I think it's very perplexing that we have our sportsman's rep that let us sportsmen down on this. And you don't need a definition of, to take control of this and approve it, you know. And Wildlife Service was not involved, so you're going to straight against the intent of the bill. You really are. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Dixon. Any other public comments? Mr. Johnson.
Brad Johnston, Lyon County CAB for the record. We did pass a motion unanimously in support of the approval of the predation management plan. Although a lot of the public comments we did receive is lack of awareness as to what the statute actually says the money can be used for. So some public outreach or some sort of education, I think, is important. Once it was explained and we went through the Nevada revised statute in various meetings in which this has come up, people understood that for any policy developed by this commission to follow 502-253, it would have to have the 4 subsections of a policy for the items in which the statute requires guidance. We never really got too hung up on the term guidance, and I think there's, if it means what Dr. Lentz says it means under the law, then there should be no need to change the use of the term guidance in this policy, and the commission can use how it sees that definition or the meaning of that term as it sees fit going forward. But we think this is a step forward in educating the sportsmen and all people as to what the $3 fee is for. It's an important policy to have in place and for it to follow the statute. We believe that because it does follow the statute, it is a faithful application of fulfillment of the Commission's duties. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the commission. Any commission comment? Commissioner McBeth.
I spoke with Director Wasley with respect to the proposed change to number 9 of the probation management plan. The department has no problem with that, and so I think that that is a good addition to the change to the policy. So with that, I'll address any other comments that the commission may have.
Any other commission comments or questions? Seeing none, I do have a comment because one thing that keeps coming up is intent. And this commission has been a victim of intent on a couple other items this year. We knew the intent of the registering traps, but then when you look at the way the law is written, intent isn't always what the law says. The law, no matter how much the intent goes into it, it's what is final on paper and what is passed by the legislature, signed by the governor. Intent flies out the window at that time. It's what's on paper. And that's what we're dealing with, is what's on paper in that law. And so I believe that this policy accurately reflects what is on paper as a law that gives us guidance to come up with policy 23. So that's my 2 cents on intent. Commissioner Moore.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In looking at the policy overall and taking into account the public comment that we've heard today, went to the Elko County Advisory Board meeting and several of them, they were opposing the policy, but we never did get any substance to what they opposed in the policy. With the exception of this last meeting, they actually broke the policy down and discussed what they liked and what they didn't like about the policy. And so with their comments and their decision, I believe I could support the 70% use of the money for the control, for actual predator control. I believe that I know that this policy can be changed at any point in time at the discretion of the chairman, and if he decides that the policy needs changes. I believe that this would set a speed limit, so to speak. Maybe I'm going to date myself, but some of us probably remember when we had the 55-mile-an-hour speed limit. That's what we did. And then when the speed limit got changed, that is what we did. And I think at this point in time, from the comments that we've heard, I would like to set that speed limit at the 70% of the money we spend on predator control.
Commissioner Bliss.
After hearing the comments and mulling this over, I have to agree with Commissioner Moore in Elko County. It's been stated that most of the general public is already, they think that's what's happening anyway, and that's what they've been, putting additional money in, like Mr. Gardner, because they thought that's where money was being spent. So about supporting Commissioner Ryan and several other people on the 70%. We're going to be utilized on people.
Commissioner Macbeth?
NRS 502253 places absolutely no restrictions on or any priority on the use of these funds. It indicates that the funds are to be used for 4 items. We have set forth those 4 items in this policy, and it is my opinion, and I would defer to our DAG, that when the statute places no restriction on the use of the funds and leaves it at the discretion of the department with the guidance of the commission as to how the money is spent, that to place, for the commission to put in a policy that places an additional restriction that 70% of the funds be used for on-the-ground control projects exceeds our authority. And we do not have the authority to put such a restriction in the policy from a legal standpoint. And so I will defer to the DAG. That would be my analysis of it, but I would defer to the DAG as to his opinion on that issue.
For the record, Harry Ward, Deputy Attorney General. At this point, I'm not in a position to give you a firm set determination on that. I think this would require a full, blown-out written Attorney General request, which would take probably 4 to 6 months for a written AG's opinion on the interpretation of the statute. And at this point, I just cannot give you quote-unquote an AG's opinion on that term. Thank you.
Okay, before I let Commissioner Bliss Wallace go, I'm going to follow up with a comment on the 70% and my prior comments on intent. I believe that this policy matches the letter of the law that is spelled out. But I believe this commission, as a body, understands the intent of the legislation. What is in writing in law is one thing, what was intent is another thing. And I believe that this body, by tying our hands with a percentage, could be the wrong message to do. I do believe that this body understands the intent of the law and can take votes and action that reflect intent. And that's how we get to intent. And there's a couple ways to look at it, and I know people look at intent of the law and try to match intent of the law into what our policy says. I don't think our policy can go in the face of what the law says with intent, but I think the votes of this commission can reflect intent, and that's how intent comes into this equation at this point. Commissioner Bliss?
I agree with that, but also during the approval of the prior projects this last year, it was a pretty tough uphill battle to get to that point. And with setting a percentage, in my mind, would make it easier to get to those points if there was projects that were science-based and needed to do that. And I would hate to see 70% of money allocated to on-the-ground control projects if there wasn't projects that were needed, so that I don't want to waste the money, but it was a difficult time to try to get to that point, to try to follow the intent portion of that as well.
Commissioner Wallace?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With all of the talk of intent and votes of the commission's intent, I do agree that kind of gives the commission's intent, but at the same time, I agree with Commissioner Mora on the 7% in Elko County. It's just giving guidance. I mean, we're using this term, giving guidance. yet at the same time, we're not going to approve, per se, the plan. So if we can give it as our guidance and use votes of the commission as intent, to me, that would give some guidance to the department when they're doing these plans, that 70% is what we would like to see. I mean, obviously, in my time on the commission, policies, they're not always followed and they're not always used. But if we can give some guidance and what we're looking for, maybe that goes one step further towards getting our result.
Commissioner Drew?
Yes, the one who brought up the difference between approval and guidance in Las Vegas, I mean, it was pretty clear to me from input from Guy Newton that we could not, even though we have authority to write broad policy, supersede guidance with approval, and he seemed to think that there was a difference between those two terminologies. So I guess that's what I'll say there. As far as the 70%, I don't think there's an issue with that. I would tend to agree with Commissioner Wallace that that's more guidance than anything, especially since it's in the policy. I don't know that I would support it. I think we should leave the maximum flexibility and put the money towards the projects that are going to be the most effective. But I don't necessarily think it's off the table for us to discuss.
Commissioner Lane?
We spent a lot of time on this policy, and when this discussion was brought up in the legislature, I distinctly remember a comment that was made between two senators, Senator Gobuchia and Senator Sagerplum, regarding the idea of predator and how much money was going to be spent in terms of this particular fee as a part of the 345 discussion. And the interesting part that I found is that you could tell that this is not a conversation that you hear very often in the committees, but basically Senator Sagerblum said we wanted 100% for research and studies, and Gobuchia said, yeah, but we wanted 100% for predator control, so we decided on 50%. So it seems to me that even at the legislature, there is a disagreement about this, and I become very concerned in trying to even provide a guidance of 70% when I look at some of the past monies that have been spent for predator control, and it's clear that those monies were not spent wisely. And I think that my view as a commissioner is that I want to make sure that the monies for this purpose from this fee are spent so that they provide the best possible outcomes for in terms of what they're being used for, whether they're studies or they're predator control. And I'm very concerned when we start talking about percentages that we run into some of the same issues that there obviously were at the legislature. And I think that we need to make sure that the plan itself as presented, that it stands on its own, and it should not be so much an issue. I think we need to get away from this, because I think what we see from some of the studies, that they provide additional information that can be used, as opposed to just simply looking at predation. So I would be very concerned about setting a standard of 70%, because I'm not, as I say, I'm not convinced in terms of this issue that there is agreement at all.
Commissioner McBeth?
I just want to, first of all, remind the commission that, members of the commission, that the commission management plan is the department's plan. But I do also want to point out that the commission management plan, in the policy itself, has the commission rating the projects. And through that process, what the commission will be doing, even though it's not approval, will be giving its guidance to the department as to what it feels is the proper amount of control programs vis-a-vis management projects, vis-a-vis research projects, and education programs. And so the mechanism is already built into the policy to, in effect, get to a percentage. But it's not a fixed percentage. It isn't an arbitrary percentage like 70%, which has no meaning. Somebody pulled that number out of the air and felt that that was a number that they felt in their mind was good. But the way the policy actually works is that for each fiscal year, based on all of the facts and circumstances that we're dealing with, whether we've had wildfires, we may need 90% to go, on the ground control program. But there may be other years where we don't. And there may be a real need to have, education, obviously. I think that's a good, based on everything, all the comments we've heard. But there may be a need for a specific research program, and more relevant in my mind is that there may be some real need to do some projects, habitat related, purchasing, things like that may be really critical for, like, say,